Imagine, if you will, a land of lakes, rivers, and peaceful pine forests, where birds chirp and deer roam, and the people are happy and soft-spoken. While some of you may think this sounds like the northern Midwest of the United States, what I'm actually talking about is Finland. It turns out that this Nordic country is known as the happiest country in the world. Don't believe me? Google it. You'll find that as of 2023, Finland has won this title the past 6 years in a row. That being said, in an age of overwhelming consumerism and global turmoil, you might not think much of the happiest country on Earth. However, if history is any proof, Finland is a country that shouldn't be underestimated. Early November, 1939. Great Britain and France have declared war on Germany for invading Poland. Meanwhile, the Soviet Union has just come out of an undeclared war with Japan and is looking for potential threats to its border. This was the beginning of the Soviet Union trying to get its hands on Finnish territory. Even though Finland had already declared itself neutral in the war, the USSR still demanded that Finland give up substantial border territories in exchange for land elsewhere, due to the fact that Leningrad was only 20 miles away from the Finnish border. They refused. On November 26, 1939, the USSR staged a border incident to give them an excuse to invade 4 days later on November 30th, 1939. They thought the ordeal would be over in a matter of weeks. They weren't prepared for what would become known as the Winter War, thanks to a Finnish concept called Sisu and a man by the name of Simo Hayha. Sisu. It's a Finnish word with only rough translations and definitions. The closest direct translation to English is the word insides, but to a Finlander, it represents a stoic courage, the ability to act rationally in the face of extreme adversity, and the will to go beyond physical and mental limits. It's an inherent characteristic of the Finnish people. You might call it backbone, spunk, stamina, guts, drive, or perseverance. It's a measure of integrity that surpasses the hardship and sees through to the end. Sisu is the indomitable will that sets Finns apart and explains many of the incredible things they've done. They knew they wouldn't win the war against the Soviets due to the vast difference in resources. However, their Sisu drove them to fight tooth and nail, with the goal of either fighting until either a friendly country decided to send support or to draw it out long enough to convince the Soviets that they weren't worth the effort. And even though the Soviets technically won the Winter War, the Finns succeeded on their latter goal, suffering a combined total of 68,480 casualties between dead, missing, and injured, while the Soviet Union lost a total of 350,000 troops in the span of the 3-month war. The Finns fought valiantly with what little they had, leaning heavily on Sisu to motivate them and drive them forward. However, Sisu alone wouldn't make up for the lack of resources. The Finns were still at a clear disadvantage, having less ammunition and weaponry, and many of their soldiers using their own personal hunting rifles for the war. And having less ammunition meant that the Finns had to make sure that every shot counted. This led Finland to rely heavily on snipers. Enter Simo Hayha, the deadliest sniper in human history. Simo was a 34-year-old farmer from the hamlet of Kiskinen. Like many Finns, he enjoyed skiing, hunting, and shooting, and growing up he spent a lot of time out in nature, hunting birds that would fly at the quietest noise, and learning to estimate distances from his father, skills that would eventually make him a nightmare for the Red Army. Throughout the war, Simo used his Mosin Nagant 2830, a rifle that he'd already owned before the war. He preferred its reliability, and though it was a basic weapon, he'd already mastered it through years of experience. His accuracy with this rifle, along with his stealth tactics, were what prompted the Red Army to give him the nickname the White Death. Throughout the course of the Winter War, Simo took out an average of 5 enemy soldiers per day. Another thing that set him apart from other snipers is he didn't use a scope. You see, by using a scope, he would have to lift his head up and give the enemy a bigger target to shoot at. And Simo's tactics were all about making himself less conspicuous, so instead he opted to use his gun's iron sights. Simo survived many attempts by the enemy to root him out, including firebombing the area that he was in. Eventually, on March 6th, an explosive round to the jaw would end the reign of the White Death. This injury put him in a coma that he wouldn't wake up from until 11 days later on March 17th, when Finland signed the armistice with the Soviet Union, ending the Winter War. As a part of the armistice, Finland gave up the border territories. However, nowadays, most sources believe that the Soviets had fully intended to conquer Finland and install a puppet Finnish communist government. But at this point, the USSR decided to cut its losses and leave Finland its independence. At the end of the war, Simo was awarded the 1st and 2nd class Medals of Liberty, as well as the 3rd and 4th class Crosses of Liberty, with the Crosses of Liberty normally being granted to only commissioned officers. As an additional honor, on February 17, 1940, Simo received a name-plated SAKO M2830 honorary rifle, which is currently on display in the Finnish Military Museum. Simo went on to make a full recovery from his wound with numerous surgeries. He spent the rest of his life farming and became a successful moose hunter and dog breeder. Never boasting of his wartime merits, he died at age 96 in 2002. And despite Finland still losing the war, the Soviet Union never took control of Finland's government, and that was thanks to Simo Hayha and the power of Sisu.